This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. Hey School Success Makers! Today we're joined by my new friend Angela, who runs the Casa de Bambini Montessori School in Aurora, Illinois, which is right outside Chicago. Their facility is beautiful, and if you have some time, please look it up online and take a look at it. It is amazing. They're doing some awesome things at their school. We highlight some of those, and her and I could have easily talked for hours because she is just an amazing educator, knows so much, and is so passionate about students. So we highlight those things, we have a blast, and I hope you guys will too on this next episode of the School Success Podcast. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend, and I'm going to warn you guys ahead of time. We can talk. I know her and I can talk, and this is because it's so easy to talk about education and where she's from, which we'll dive into in just a second. But I'm here talking with Miss Angela, who is the head of school at her school in the Aurora, Naperville, Illinois area, right outside Chicago. And she is at the Casa de Bambini Montessori School. A mouthful, but they are doing amazing things there, guys. And we're going to dive into all of it. Angela is amazing, and I can't wait to just dive in and ask her some questions and for you guys to learn from her. But I don't want to take any thunder away from her, so I'm going to pass it off to her to introduce herself. So, Miss Angela, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Mitchell. Good to see you. Congratulations on all your awesome podcasts. They've just been amazing. You've had some really good guests. Congratulations. Thank you for having me. What a privilege.
We're going to have a blast today, and I would love to start out like how did you get started in living in Chicago area? I'm assuming maybe I think we've talked a little bit about this. You're originally from there, but let's dive into a little bit of how you got to where you are today.
Oh, great. Well, I did grow up here. So I was born and raised in Wheaton, Illinois, in the suburbs. And I spent most of my younger years here. So I didn't really relocate down to Florida until I was about 19 or 20 years old. So really after that is when I started my whole Montessori journey. So once I landed in Florida, I was actually pregnant with my oldest daughter in 1994. So I'm just dating myself a little bit right now. But it does stem back to that era and a very special time. So I was introduced to Montessori by being a nanny for a family whose daughter went to a Montessori school. So part of my job was to pick her up from her school at the end of the day. And I started talking to the teachers a little bit more and kind of pushing myself into the classroom a little bit more and just getting curious about what are all these little boxes in here and why are all these children just so calm and peaceful and why is this so different? So I started asking a lot of questions, and the next thing I know, I just enrolled in a training course for the summer to get my official Montessori training while I was pregnant. So that was a fun journey. But that's where it started. And after about a 2-year practicum, you become trained and you become a leader in Montessori, and you do an internship so that you can gain that certificate, which would allow you to teach worldwide. So once you have that foundation set, you're able to utilize these awesome materials that Dr. Maria Montessori made. And because they're universal, everybody worldwide has the same concept so that it's consistent for the children. So that's pretty much where it began. And I ended up becoming a teacher trainer, which is really important to me, and being able to forward all these awesome messages and taking my care and experience into consideration to be able to pay it forward to new teachers. So I've been doing that since 2001. So it's been a long journey, mostly in and out of private schools for myself. I really never wanted to, I just didn't buy into traditional elementary education. That's just not where my education track took me. I did this specialized training right kind of in the middle of my college years, and it was just something special and something different. So it seemed important to me to pursue that. And my only experience in working with elementary education students was in my first public Montessori school, which was down in the Delray Beach area of Florida, called SD Spady. And that's a very special place because I had never had that background where it combined traditional education using Common Core standards and implementing all the Montessori materials by trained teachers and combining the two. So it was definitely an interesting hybrid program, but it gave me such amazing insight. The differentiated learners, the way Montessori fits in for all different ways that the brain thinks and how we're already pre-wired, it just spoke volumes to me, and my eyes were wide open. And I had never experienced anything like that. Being able to help children in remediation and see how the materials fit in for different ways to learn really helped, and all of the tracking and everything. So that was a major stepping stone for me. It brought me back here to Chicago because in that role, I was able to leave the classroom and join the admin team as their Montessori program coordinator. And that gave me a lot of insight to the administration level of being in a Montessori school and running a school and working very closely with our principal and our assistant principal. And I was the liaison between the teachers, the parents, and the administrators. So it was a really special role. We served about 600 students from age 3 to 12 at the time. And being their coordinator, I knew every single child, every parent. It was such a fascinating, special place. But that particular experience is what led me back up here to Chicago, not only for family reasons, because I still have family here. My husband has his family here, and a lot of our high school friends are still here. So it was special for me to come back home, if you will, to Chicago and find myself with this opportunity to do this new startup school as head of school at Casa de Bambini Montessori. It hadn't even opened yet when I arrived. So I was really part of that startup crew, getting licensed by DCFS, learning all the rules of Illinois, nothing I was familiar with because all my adult training and all my years in Florida was a completely different state. So it was a challenge, but a good one. And I have to say, I feel like I've set us up for some really good success, and our track is just growing. And we now serve infants through kindergarten at this time, but the building is large. And if you get to see on our website or videos on our website, you'll be able to see the magnitude of our campus because its capacity holds about 500. Man. So we're growing, and eventually it's meant to be an elementary school, so infants through 6th grade. So we're on that path of trajectory to try and get it increased in its enrollment to keep it going strong. So that's where I am now, head of school and hiring teachers and building families and making a school community. That's what it's all about.
And it is a beautiful school. And anybody who does visit, I encourage you to visit the website because there's a picture of it right on the homepage. It's ginormous and it's beautiful, right in the middle of like the city, the town, and it is. And I'm excited you guys have a building to grow into. Is that something that you're adding a grade every year? Is that kind of the trajectory to get to 6th grade?
It hopefully will go that way. We're not even into the elementary years yet. And that pandemic kind of took us a backslide by about a year, because we were on that path to open our first lower elementary unit. And what happened during the pandemic, so many children stayed home and the parents got nervous, and we certainly understand and respect that. But when those children stayed home and went on to laptop learning and distance learning, parents weren't sending their children back to school. So we lost that bulk of our kindergartners. And those would have been the retained students, the retention that we needed to matriculate upstairs to our first elementary classroom. And when we lost that group, I kind of had to start back over again. So in fact, it was such a hardship. And I know other leaders feel that it's such a struggle. I know that other schools resonate with exactly what I'm saying. When we all took a hit, we had over 100, close to 100 students right before the pandemic. And when I tell you, when we came back, there were seven or 10 students that returned. And I had to rebuild the entire school community again and hire new teachers again. And thankfully we're back, and it took quite a while, but we pulled together, and it's got to be a team effort. I can't do it alone. I need a strong staff and committed people. And without them, I wouldn't be able to keep going on this positive path. So it's definitely building a village, right? You need the village to care for the child, and that's just where we're at. So finally we're growing again, but it was a struggle.
Man. And just in case anybody's tuning in and they're not super familiar with Montessori, I would love just like it could even be just a 60-second overarching view. Like what is Montessori? Because I know there's in this journey of interviewing people across the country, I've learned there's so many different styles of learning, styles of teaching. We've interviewed a friend's school in Virginia. There's a Waldorf school we've interviewed, like all these different styles that I'm learning about too. And obviously, I love the Montessori style of education. Again, anybody who's listening who's not really familiar with it, what would you say that
Sure, absolutely. And I love that you touched on how closely related some of those other philosophies are, like the Waldorf schools, the Reggio schools, very similar to Montessori. But the Montessori approach really stemmed from a real woman. If people don't know that, her name was Dr. Maria Montessori. If people have heard of her, they might just think of her as a teacher who trained other teachers. But she actually was the first woman doctor, the first woman physician that graduated from the University of Rome in the late 1800s. So it's pretty exciting when you think that she was already studying brain development with a group of men, and it was just unheard of. She was well ahead of her time and scientifically approached. And because of that, her entire dynamic that followed just became a worldly philosophy where she wanted to bring the world to the children, help them understand real world concepts, make child-sized furniture, and create these materials based on the brain development in response to what the children were craving and needing and asking for. And these formative years became so important that now these materials that I was expressing to you earlier that are found universally worldwide have to be implemented and utilized by trained teachers so that they're serving the purpose that she intended for them. So I have to say, there's a lot of Montessori schools that might not come across as being authentic environments. You find a little bit watered down or hybrid environments when you don't have those magical pieces in place. Leadership that's trained, teachers that are trained, and the materials that support the children. Without those things, it's not going to be a true environment. But I have to say, some of the most important aspects that one would get out of attending a Montessori school, it helps children gain a sense of independence, a sense of order, concentration, coordination. It really fosters individuality. And that, I think that's one of the main differences between a daycare center and a Montessori learning school. I hope that helps.
It does. And I would love to even dive in a little bit deeper, because I know you're very passionate about Montessori education and been doing it a while. So you talk about, obviously Miss Maria Montessori, late 1800s, they knew a lot back then, but obviously in where we are today, there's always new studies that come out where we learn just new things about development and children and adults and all that stuff. Do you feel like has Montessori pretty much stayed the same since the beginning, or has it had to, or has it adapted with the new things we have learned about development and discipline and education through the years, or has it kind of been the same?
No, good question. It's definitely evolved. There's a certain set of principles that will always remain authentic, that will never change and should never change. Like we could get into all of the things that help Montessori become recognized for things that might be different than other types of learning environments, being child-centered. Or in this Montessori approach, we have different core areas of the classroom. And within those core areas, things can change because the children of today have changed and our technology has changed. Our parents have changed, more cars on the road now, more jobs that are happening, both parents working. This changes the outcome of the children in the home. Then when they come to school, their needs change too. So it's more than just the materials that evolve, or we make accommodations for certain children. It's more than that. We're looking at the background, the families that the children come from, what kind of hardships they might be encountering. And because of the circumstances of the world changing, I think that's what changes in our approach of how we address children.
Okay. Now, here's one for you. I know she passed away, I think, in the 50s, early 50s. Mm-hmm. If she was to be around today and see a Montessori school, would she be like, this is exactly what I envisioned? Or you think she'd be like, this is way different than what it was, even as I passed away, towards the end of her lifespan? Do you think she would be really proud of where Montessori is at and where education is at?
Well, I would hope so. I hope she would be proud of the things that have been accomplished. I think some things might be probably frowned upon. Only because it's getting more complicated. I don't know how else to describe it, but she seemed like in those times life was simpler, and it didn't need to be so complicated with magical toys that made noise and loud things, tablets. I have infants that swipe with a finger now. She and our generation, anybody that, from when times were simpler, could resonate with the fact that it doesn't have to be complicated. Children need to be outside playing and getting dirty and making mud pies still, all of that good stuff with nature walks and talking to our children, and not on our phones, but making connections and communicating, and all those foundational principles. I feel like our families are changing. And I think a lot of times that's the basics are sometimes missing. So if she were to walk in and see children on computers or tablets, I think she'd roll over in her grave. The materials were designed to be manipulatives and hands-on so they could experiment and just flow freely through the classroom at their own discretion without being attacked with technology and all these heightened things that just have taken over our world.
Yeah, and I know that was a curveball question. I was like, I'm just curious. I never actually thought about it before of like, hey, if that person, this could go for any type of school, of like a founder who came back 100 years later, 50 years later, would they be like, what the heck is this school, or what is happening? And I think she would be proud, because you've had to adapt, like you said, to technology that's come out, and how to figure out where do we stand on this thing that was never a thing before, and that she never had to, of course, figure out or come up with. But it's pretty remarkable from, like you said, late 1800s, learning this stuff. That's so early, to figure that out and to put it into place, and that it stood the test of time and grown into this big behemoth of a style of learning, which is just really cool. Again, I love it. I love the some of the things I love about the Montessori education is keeping taking a toy, and again, simple toys that don't have noise or don't have sound or whatever, just putting it one on a shelf and then another one on a shelf, and very simple. Like in Milo, our 2.5-year-old's playroom, we have just little cubbies, and we have one toy on each little cubby. And it's it just looks nicer just to go like, okay, there's not toys everywhere, because we have friends, you go to their house and there's just toys and fun toys, but they never get played with because there's just so many to mess with. So we rotate every, not as often as we should, but every couple weeks to a month, we'll rotate and send out the toys. And he got into the closet where it had the other toys last night, and he goes, and he's just like, And they're the same toys he's played with a month ago, but he was like so excited to have this toy and go play with it. I was like, man, it's just when you don't get to see it all the time, he's excited about it. And I wanted to touch on the nature thing that you mentioned, like kids being in nature. And I love that. And I totally agree with that. And one of the things that has been so cute with Milo when I pick him up from school is there's this little grate that has like water and like a pump or something in it out in front of the school. And I don't know how they must have done like a little walkthrough where he found it because he knew about it. And so he calls it yucky water because it's like all brown and everything in there. So he wants to see the yucky water every day.
Yeah.
So Pick runs over to the yucky water, and there's little tadpoles in the water. And so I told him, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I was like, Milo, those are tadpoles. They're baby frogs. They're going to be a big frog one day, you know? And so every day he runs over, he's like, I see tadpoles. I see tadpoles. And he runs over and he's like, and they're slowly growing as we're watching them. And I was like, that's the best way to learn. Like, instead of going, hey, let's watch this documentary, Milo, on frogs, let's go see a real frog.
A real frog. Did you scoop one up and take it home for him so you can observe in a little tank and let him watch it grow?
That's actually a really good idea. I don't know if I can lift that grate. It is like, I don't know if it's attached. I didn't even think about it, but I should try and actually lift it and see if I can get one in a cup.
Hold some and just bring them home and start observing and watch, see the changes. You could show him some sequence cards so that he can envision how they're physically growing and actually see ahead, like a sneak peek of what it's going to turn into. And he can watch that happening right before his eyes. Well, you're a parent of a Montessori child, and you had many choices to consider for an educational journey for him. Why did you choose Montessori? Parent perspective.
I'm interviewing you, Angela.
Jeez, I know, but guess what? Parents want to hear that too.
Yeah, this is good. No, it's good. My wife, I put it all on her for that. She found it, and that's funny. Her and I talked about this recently. We didn't really know where we initially heard or found out about it. We had heard about, I will say this, we heard about the word in like the name Montessori back when we lived in Alaska. There's a Montessori school in Anchorage that my wife didn't specifically work at this school, but did a summer program and helped out of this program at this Montessori school. And she went in, and it was one of those things like they used the name Montessori, but it was not a Montessori school because they obviously those that listen, anybody can use the name Montessori. It's not like a trademark.
Yep, we talked about that. You got it.
And so we're like, oh, so it's just a school like with the word, like it didn't click because it wasn't anything specifically a Montessori school. And that was years ago. So when we got down to where we live now in Florida, I think she had heard about it from some people she followed online that had mentioned it. And then we started just, when we knew we were pregnant, started obviously just reading about parenting and what, and I think she found it and she just like, it made sense to her. So she's like, hey, check out this Montessori like style. It's like you talk to the kids differently, you teach them differently and everything. And I was like, in my head, it was like, it's a kid, you kind of you raise a kid. It's just very, simple, right? But I started reading it and we watched some documentaries, we read blog posts, and I was like, this makes sense. It just made sense to me. Again, not talking bad about any other style. It just, for us and our family and us being, just her and I and then him, I was like, I think we can do this. I think this makes sense. So we started doing that from the very young age, like the toys we bought them, the way we talked, which again, not talking bad about any of her parents or my parents or whatever, but it was like not how we were raised. So it's all new. So we're like learning like how we talk to them, like, oh, we should one of the things I think I love most about the Montessori and how talking about them is being very descriptive in how you talk. And I never thought about that. And again, it's just a way of doing it. So when okay, pick them up from school. How was your day at school? It's good. And I said, what did you do? Oh, I went down the slide. Oh, what color was the slide? Oh, did you go fast or slow? Was it, and doing that, like very descriptive. So he is learning. And I feel like it's worked because he starts using those descriptive words, and just randomly for him, I'm like, oh, he's been listening, like it's clicking. So, and then when he gets upset, I think that's probably one of the other things. Instead of going, this is one of the ones that's really hard because we have to keep reminding ourselves. And correct me if I'm wrong, if this isn't Montessori, but this is something we've been doing, is if he falls and hurts himself, not telling him he's okay. Like, hey, you're okay, get up or whatever. and like actually acknowledging the feelings that he's having. So he falls and we always say, and it could be the simplest little fall. We go, "Are you okay?" And almost all the time he goes, "Yep, I'm all right." And he gets up and keeps going. But like acknowledging his feelings. So when he's crying, we go, and this is it just takes longer. And that's the thing, like you have to be kind of, I feel like in Montessori, it's a longer form of parenting because of how you have to talk. So he'll come up and be upset and be like, "Hey, you're really upset right now. But why are you upset? What's going on?" And I will say for 2.5, he's really good at starting to think through his feelings, which I really haven't really seen a kid do before. So after he calms down, he'll come up to us now and he'll be like, "I cried." And I was like, "Oh, you did? Why? Let's talk about that. Why were you crying?" "Daddy said no." I was like, "Yeah, Daddy said no. Why did Daddy say no?" And he goes, "Because it could hurt Milo." I was like, "Yeah, it could hurt Milo. That's why we said." So like he's figuring it out and putting it together. And I feel like that's better than just going, "Stop crying, you're whatever." Like telling them to not show their emotions, which emotions are good. So that was a really long rant, but I love all those things.
Remember we were talking about speaking for the children and giving them their words when they don't have them. So putting those words in their mouth or in the dialogue is what's going to help them learn to articulate his thoughts. Because right now they're all jumbled up. Sometimes he can't get out what he's thinking, which is a really good point that you made when you're asking your child about how was your day? Or what did you do today? I talk about this with our parents because that's such a big question. It's so general and so broad. In a child's day, they've done 10,000 tasks. And so for them to answer, what did you do today? They don't even know where to start. They'll pick like one thing that, like you said, I went down the slide. And parents are like, "What, you didn't learn anything?" But the question should have been, "What book did you read on circle time today? And what characters were in that story? Tell me about it." So when you get specific or ask the question specifically, then you're going to get more feedback and better answers. They can't quite put into perspective everything they've done to be able to say, "What did you do?" or "How did it go?" or "What was your favorite part today?" Sometimes that's too hard. So I try to remind parents to dig a little deep, right? Find something to discuss on the car ride home. Don't just put on music or tune them out, but talk about these things, and then they'll get the feedback. Some parents get concerned when they don't get a daily report. That's something that's different in Montessori too. Because the teachers train to work with 20 individual students and they're all on their own independent track for learning, each one of those children are doing 10 to 20 tasks a day. How could she possibly record or articulate to one parent or 20 parents what happened to all these children in that one day? So when I explain to parents, there won't be a daily report because it's your job to talk to your child about what they did today. So they can express to you when they went to the bathroom, what they ate for lunch, what kind of books they read on circle time, or what activities they did, or what kind of nature, things they found on their nature walk, or what have you, so that they can dialogue about it and not just read it on an app. So that app is a great tool for young children, infants and toddlers who can't articulate those things. So parents can understand what they did over the course of the day. But once you get into primary 3 to 6, and Milo's heading into that stage soon, you've already got that skill down pat because you're already talking about it. But some parents don't know that, and they need to dive in a little bit more and dig deep. That's when those conversations get really healthy and exciting.
Yeah, I love that we can finally communicate. Like I was one of the ones, like my wife and I, we didn't love the baby stage because Milo had colic for 6 months. And so it just wasn't as enjoyable as people were like, "Oh, the baby stage is the best." We're like, it was just brutal. Like we just didn't have as much fun with it because of that. But now that he's like a toddler, like, for me, like I can play with him, I can wrestle with him. He can, like, we had him in swim lessons, so he can swim. Like, so he's swimming and floating and like loves to be in the ocean. And so like all different, like he's like a little kid now. So you can like communicate and he can tell you what he wants. For me, that's just way more enjoyable because like you communicate with him.
That's special.
And I love, like, I'm sure anybody listening will be like, oh, they're a big proponent of reading to kids, and I love reading. It's one of my favorite things to do with him, kids books. And one day, Angela, you have to hold me to it. And I've written 2 children's books, but they've never been published or anything. I need to tweak them enough, and I want to put them out there. I do want to put them out there because they're like, I love books. I love kids. And so I'm like, man, I have all these ideas. I have 32 titles. Like, the title has been written. I know exactly what I want to do with the book. Just like, do I have the time? Like, I want to put it out there. I'll probably just use Amazon to like publish them with on-demand printing or something, just so they get out and parents can buy them and stuff. But I love books, and so I love reading. And one of the things I love about it is like the things Milo will pick up on that we didn't know because of reading a book. So like, I actually took him shopping the other day. He loves the grocery shop. We have his own little mini cart from Melissa and Doug that he can go push around and put stuff in. And he was walking through and he goes, artichokes. And we're like, how does he know artichoke? We've never bought an artichoke before. And it's in one of his books where it's like, we've learned like, that's an artichoke, that's a banana, that's a whatever. And so he's just like, oh, it's an art. And we've, again, never bought one. He's never seen one, I don't think, before in real life. And he just like, that's an artichoke. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, reading is amazing.
That happened to us recently, and one of the teachers came to tell me about her 2-year-old in the classroom who she had done a real veggie lesson, like brought the actual real veggies to the circle time, which is way different than just holding up a picture card, right? And this little boy who never said a word, just out of nowhere, he just said eggplant. I couldn't believe it. It happens all the time. I mean, she goes, I never even heard him speak, and now he just said eggplant.
Man, I hope that's his first word, because that, like, ever, like, his parents are like, he's never said anything, but not even mama and dad he says eggplant.
No, it's so true. That happened with my own daughter, the younger one. When she started speaking, the first word that came out of her mouth was doggy. It wasn't mama or dada, but doggy was her favorite thing. And that's what came out of her mouth, little Joe.
So being back at your school, I guess I'd love to dive into your school a little bit more. Being, smaller at the moment as you guys are growing into there, obviously you guys, and you've already mentioned this, you have some challenges you're up against as you guys are looking to grow, but I'd love to just kind of dive into what are some of these other challenges you guys have right now as a school, and how are you currently combating them or planning to combat those challenges you guys have?
Well, mostly the biggest challenge was enrollment. And that was the main thing that we discussed. Coming back from the pandemic was just so hard, and not like coming back from it. I feel like we're still in it, it's still happening. And the thing is, enrollment obviously has got to be a key to the success. We were struggling for a while. But the only thing that I have to say about that is, by word of mouth, by reviews, by marketing ourselves, doing these tours that I do with parents on a daily, regular basis, is trying to convey the message, to put us out there, to gain the trust of parents, to have them send their child back to school. We've converted, if you will, a lot of children out of COVID. They've never seen people outside of their own family. Some of them have never left their homes, and they have no experience with being dropped off or being away or with strangers during the day. And I have to ease parents into that process and help them understand to trust us. And it is a process. And we look to the child, and it's actually usually pretty easier for the child than it is the parents. Because once the children start coming to school regularly and start building their connections and their bonds with their teachers and their peers and getting excited about the materials, once they start feeling relaxed and safe, then the learning will take place. And that's when the enrollments keep increasing. Then we get more and more students. So enrollment is a key. I think also trained teachers or hiring teachers. This has been a huge obstacle that everybody's been encountering, not nationwide, worldwide. So it's been so difficult to try and find people that are passionate, patient, trained. We pride ourselves on not hiring just caregivers, but educators, people that want to be in this field, I have a lot of teachers that have left their previous field and just want to be with children and work with children and learn how they can serve children. And some of our teachers are master level people, but in an IT field, or it could be something random, microbiology. That was their area of expertise, but now they have a passion for children. Wow. And they want to learn and live and breathe. And so they learn from me, and we can create that synergy across the campus for being excited to serve these children. So I think those two have been major obstacles: enrollment, hiring people that want to be there and stay dedicated and foster their own development and keep learning. So I try to promote that. I always try to pay forward to either teachers or our families if there's upcoming sessions that they might be interested in for continuing education or bringing Montessori to the home, or how we can bridge the gap between home and school is so important. That's an obstacle. What parents do at home versus what we do in school, and trying to be the facilitator that communicates in the bridge between those two things, that's a big part of my job. Communicating the effectiveness it has on the children when we can be consistent in the way that we speak and in the way that we behave and how we respond to their needs.
Do you know if there's much data on people who, so Montessori schools specific, and this could go for any school, but I guess obviously we're having the Montessori talk, is data on these kids go home, and you got two different families. You got one family that doesn't do Montessori at all, like at all at home, like not just normal. And then you have family who does do Montessori fully at home. The difference in like how the kids do at the school specifically, if they know in their brains, they go, oh, this is school, this is what it is. And they do good. And then they come back home. And do you know if there's any correlation of how they grasp, how they learn because of the different lifestyles at home?
I would suspect there are definitely research patterns and follow-ups and studies that have been done. I know there have been many writings about this, and how far do Montessori children go, and what happens to them. Let's say what happens to them when they mainstream into a public school setting or any different type of environment once they're already trained, or let's just say fostered from early childhood. So the whole key is that whatever concepts that any child encounters or takes in from birth to 6, let's say during the formative years, is going to take them into their adulthood, and it will resonate and be internalized as their foundation and create the kind of person that they're going to become. But if the child doesn't have consistent messages, I would think that would delay a little bit of their growth, when they must feel confused and need to almost turn on and off switches on their inner being throughout their day when they're in different settings and different environments. So I would think it would be a very positive outcome if the child is surrounded by consistency. And if we can provide that for them by opening the parents' eyes or enlightening them on some of these skills, or a common question is, what can I do with my child at home? But sometimes when parents ask that, they're thinking, I want to teach them reading and writing and numbers. And that's not always what we're talking about. What can you do with your child at home? Like I said, take them on nature walks, dialogue about vocabulary, read books at nighttime, give them responsibilities to do at home. They're very capable and they want to thrive, and they also want to impress you. Little people want nothing more than to make you feel like you're proud of them, and they keep doing things, but primarily for themselves. They have that inner feeling of strength and security and glowing because they feel so proud for what they've done. Some children don't look for that external reward at all. And I think that's special in Montessori, that it's all intrinsic. So rather than always walking around and saying, good job, and you did it, let's be more specific. Wow, you completed that entire knobbed cylinder puzzle all on your own. You must feel so proud of yourself right now. You put all the cylinders right back where they belong. Good for you. That's a very specific statement, other than, good job, you did it, you finished. put it away now. That's a different message.
Yeah, and that's another piece of the thing. Like I said earlier, it's like it's longer. The doing it that way, it takes longer. And I think sometimes granted, everybody I think is guilty of this. You're just like, sometimes you're like, I'm burned out today. I don't have time to do the full thing or whatever. But it takes more to think about, like, all right, I'm going to describe what it is they just completed so they know what they completed. I think that's one of those things for my wife and I, it just made sense. Like when you hear somebody talk about this is why we do that, I'm like, that makes sense. Like it's learning different dialogue, it's learning different words. So, and having them not be dependent on adult approval for everything that they do. And I think that's a big piece. I think that is pushed in our culture, I guess, a lot too, is like, I need to get validation on everything I do to make sure that it's okay. And another thing I like that I don't feel like Montessori pushes is like, hey, it's about the student and whatever they're wanting to learn or trying to learn at the time, which is cool. Well, I think it's the perfect segue into my next part, which is my favorite part, which is where you get to brag about your school, brag about what you guys are doing. So I know we've already done that a little bit, but is there any other pieces, like what's the school doing really, really good that you're proud of? It could be, where teachers are at, where students are at, family interactions, anything, but I'll bounce it back to you.
Oh boy, what are we doing? So much. I think it's exciting that our enrollment is growing because we are at the stage now where we have more classrooms open than we ever have, and we are on a path to open 2 more in the next 2 months. So there's a big demand for infants and toddlers right now. Our toddler level is full. We only have 1 infant classroom. So we may need to add another one soon because that's a really big demand right now. A lot of babies came out of COVID. We have siblings that are being born. And, our school has a couple of sister schools in the Houston area, and their schools start at 18 months. So it was a big leap for us. And our school is the C model. There's A, B, C model, right? Ours is the largest of the 3. So it has the biggest capacity. So we decided to create a Nido classroom and have an infant environment for parents. And I think that's a special place for Montessori. I have parents that come and tour with me who say, it's so hard to find Montessori schools that have infant levels. And if I look at daycares, I'm not really super impressed with what I'm seeing, and I want something different. I want something more, and I would like the foundation to start from younger. And so I thought that was important to add that on, and we've been very successful with that. We still have a lot of our infants have grown now, so they're in the primary classrooms, like wearing uniforms, but they were our babies when we held them at 4 months old. So of course, we're very connected with the families, and I think it's really exciting to hire more teachers now and order materials. It's like Christmas at Casa right now because all the boxes are coming in, and Miss Angela's getting to set up new environments and keep growing. And so all of that's going really, really well.
Good. That's exciting.
Very exciting.
What else? There's got to be some other fun things before I wrap it up. But what are things for like families? Is there like a lot of involvement from the families, and is that a thing you guys are able to do right now with, COVID? I don't know how
it's been a big challenge for me, Mitchell. With this pandemic, it's been difficult, and we have not been able to have gatherings like I'm used to doing. I absolutely love, if I could have a pipe dream of making a parenting academy. I think the parents need all this information to be trained, sometimes even more than the children. But the outreach is so important to share the message so that we can gain that consistency for the children. If I'm not able to do parent meetings or host a philosophy night or a curriculum night, I do share with them, via email, or I'll send articles, or as I mentioned, give them some podcasts, or maybe there's some classes coming up that might enlighten them on the philosophy or parenting skills or so forth. So I try to stay very connected. I build our school community based on being a school family, and that's something that's important to me from the time the parents enter the building, so that they can understand that they're coming into a safe place where we're all connected and working together. So we do a lot of fun things with the children. Obviously, songs, music, and movement. We celebrate holidays and all of our cultural diversities. I mentioned to you about bringing the world to the children. Since our children really can't get out into the world, or there were lots of restrictions, it's really our job to share with them as much knowledge as we can. And there's just no boundaries. That's what I love about Montessori. There's just no boundaries and no curriculum that is predetermined. Every day is different. When you walk in, you can't almost plan for what's going to occur in the day. The children and their decisions and their choices and their freedom of movement is what causes the day to occur. And then we respond to them. So it's very child-centered. It's very much in response to their needs. That's why a lot of Montessori teachers are called directresses as opposed to the teacher, because we're directing the children into the area that would serve them, that would heighten their needs, or maybe they have a specific interest. And just by exploration and experimentation, they're doing it all. And what they can do and what they're capable of doing is so incredibly magical. It's so impressive.
Totally agree. And it's one of those things I was surprised with having a kid and giving them responsibility of like, oh, let's see if they can do this. Oh, okay, they could. Like Milo, like the grocery shopping. The kid loves to go in the grocery store and we'll say, all right, we need to go get apples or we need to go get something. And it's like, it's a hoot because everybody is like staring at him and just like, oh my gosh, the kid's pushing a cart. And Angela, this is the coolest thing. So he can reach it. He can put all the groceries on the conveyor belt on his own. He can just reach it and he can pay. I give him a credit card and he knows how to push it into the sensor in the right way. So I just give him the thing and I stand back, puts all the groceries on the top and he swipes the card and leaves. It's so freaking cute. And it's just amazing the things he can do. He loves to cook. So him and I will cook dinner and do stuff and has his own little knife that he can use. That's not going to, kill him,
Absolutely.
It's fun. I just like that. And this is one of the things too. Like my mom did more Montessori things with me than because she didn't know about what that was, but she taught us how to cook when we were younger. We had a huge garden. So we taught us how to garden and we had grapevines when we were growing up too. So she taught us how to prune the grapevines. Like we just very hands-on growing up of stuff, which would of course fall under like, oh, that's very Montessori, but it was just, oh, that's how my mom and dad did it. They were just like, you need to learn how to take care of stuff. It's part of growing up. So we learned that, but
that's just awesome.
It's been fun. It's been very, very fun for sure. And this has been obviously great conversation. We're not quite done. We have one more big question. We'll see what, where we go after this. But as we kind of wrap it up, I always ask people, hey, if there was a piece of advice that you would leave with any other school leaders or people that are listening right now, if you could give them any type of tip or thing you'd want to share with them, what would that one piece be?
Specifically to Montessori, for new parents that are coming in, I think it's important for them to know that it's a special place when you understand that as educators and the children in the classroom and who we surround ourselves with, that we absolutely approach all the areas of development. I think it's so mainstreamed in traditional way of thinking that parents think school is only just for learning the academics. And that really is true and important for the cognitive piece. But there's a whole other part to a child that we address on a regular basis that makes it a special place, that it's not just pushing the learning all the time, but it's building the connections. There's 5 areas of development. There's the social piece, having a mixed age group in Montessori, which we didn't talk much about, but it's so necessary for the children to learn from each other and from their peers. And so that social piece of a mixed age group where you have role models and leaders teaching younger children what they know. And because they've internalized the concepts, they can now share that with someone else. So that when you master a skill and internalize it and you're able to teach it to someone, that's a really special connection. And learning from peers is different and super cool, as opposed to the teacher always dictating to the children. So the younger ones learn from the older ones teach the younger ones. It's truly amazing and harmonious that way. So that social piece is in place for them to learn how to communicate effectively and talk to each other instead of just grabbing and being angry or, it's mine, or waiting their turn, or learning patience. All of those things is part of that social experience where the teacher can model and jump in to help facilitate those conversations so they're effective. And then, of course, that lends itself to the emotional piece of a child. Well, how was your morning at home? Was it chaotic today? Was dad running late for a meeting, getting you out the door, rushing you out the door? And that's how your morning started. So we have to be sensitive to that. And so an emotional piece for the child, being keen on their needs or just supporting them if they need a hug, or if they look like they're going to cry and say, you look sad today. Are you okay? And my grandma left and went back to India. I'm so sorry. You must feel really sad that she had to go and say goodbye. Would you like a hug? So connecting with them that way is so important. Do I want to jump in and give them a math lesson right now? It's like, now is not the time. They need to really be with their feelings, and we need to be okay with that and be patient. So that's an emotional piece of being keen and being aware of where they're at, and is the window open or is it closed right now? Because we're not going to reach a child whose brain is shut down and we're having an emotional morning. So there's no sense in wasting time. What they need to feel is loved and safe and secure, and get them out of that brain STEM mode and back into higher learning up here, in their frontal lobe, because otherwise they're going to be in fight or flight motion and they're not going to be able to function the rest of the day. So we have to kind of break down and kind of peel back the layers of those onions sometimes to find the heart of what happened, so we can address it and acknowledge it and resonate and then move forward together. And then when they know they have a partner that they can do that with, someone they trust, their teacher, their friends, then that emotional piece is getting served too. So cognitive learning is going to serve itself from the materials. The social piece, mixed age groups. Emotional, being connected and serving each other. Physical development, we were just talking about Milo. Look at all the changes that has occurred for him from just 2 to almost 3. So when we're really trained in child development and we understand the physical development part of a child's body changing, and maybe they're feeling weird things inside, or they don't understand why, or maybe they're able to do things now they weren't able to do before, and that allows them to grow and learn in different ways that they weren't able to do before. All of that physical development is going to take place too. So sometimes learning is about, for toddlers, let's say, learning to kick a ball or catch a ball or sit on a tricycle or get off of a tricycle. That's learning. That's not academics by a traditional sense like math and language. But for a toddler, that's their learning for the day. That's their physical development. And that has to be honored. That takes place every day too. But I think what's really special, and I want to finish with this one specifically, because I think that's what's unique to Montessori. It's the spiritual development. Spiritual development does not mean religion per se. It means we're honoring the child's spirit, the one that's already pre-wired, the one that came to us, right, from their broken morning, because we don't know what happened at home, but here they've arrived at school, and that's what we have to mold for the day. And that spiritual development is going to lend itself to the peace curriculum that's unique to Montessori. So learning how to talk, learning how to wait patiently. We have a peace table in our classrooms so that the children can go there if they need to decompress and have a safe place where they can just go and relax and be away from maybe the work they're doing. Maybe they feel challenged by it. Maybe somebody interrupted them. Whatever, there's a place to go. And that peace table is going to help that child just kind of dive back into themselves, regenerate whatever they need to do, calm themselves down, and then come back again when they're ready on their time. So sometimes there's a discrepancy in the classroom between two children. Let's say they're having a discussion, or it becomes a little bit of an argument. And this is an opportune time for that spiritual development, to where we as teachers can jump in and help those conversations foster and grow by teaching them how to have an effective communication, and being able to maybe hold a peace, Rose. When it's my turn to talk, I'll hold it. And when it's your turn to talk, you'll hold it. But when I'm holding it, it's your turn to listen. And it's teaching them to wait patiently and listen to what the other person is saying before it's my turn to speak. So it's honor and respect, grace and courtesy. And that particular component is very unique to Montessori, that you will not find in traditional settings.
Man, so much we could unpack there and still talk probably for another hour. But I want to be respectful, of course, of your time. Angela, thank you. Like this has been one of my favorites for sure, hands down. And I just love what you're doing. I love what you guys are doing there and right outside Chicago. And I have really no doubt in my mind you guys are gonna grow and continue to just pour into this next generation that's coming after us. So continue to love those kids and pour into those kids. And thank you for all you're doing.
I love this talk, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. And I am so grateful to have been a part of this. And your journey is awesome. Congratulations on what you're doing, and keep it going, man. Keep it going.
Thank you. Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Angela for taking time and being on the podcast today. I learned a ton from her, and I easily could have chatted for hours upon hours more with her. Super easy person to talk to, and I'm just wishing her and her school nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate more and more students there right outside the Chicago area. And as always, guys, I'm hoping you can take at least one thing from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And that, of course, is the goal, the vision for this School Success podcast, that you guys will be able to learn from all these amazing guests that we're having on and be able to take those back to your school to make it better than they are right now. That's my goal. It's my vision. I'm hoping you guys are able to do that. We have some amazing resources for you guys that I want you to tap into. One of those, of course, is our website. Check us out online, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. We work specifically with schools to help them grow enrollment and streamline their application process, and we love doing it. So please reach out to us there if you have any questions or need help. Also, we have a free private Facebook community just for school leaders on Facebook, of course, called School Success Makers. It's a private Facebook group, so just search in the group section for School Success Makers, and we'd love to see you in there. I'm personally in there, and I'd love to see you there. So if you guys have any questions, of course, reach out to us. But hey, as always, we will be here next week with another amazing guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.